All right, some really big news coming out of Singapore for businesses. It looks like the financial regulators have just hit the reset button on the mandatory climate reporting deadlines, giving a lot of companies some much-needed breathing room.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, what does this reset actually mean and why now? Then, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of the new rules for both listed companies and the big private ones. And finally, we'll zoom out and see what this all means for Singapore's long-term climate goals.
Okay, so here's the headline. The clock is being pushed back. Now, while some of the basic reporting requirements are staying put, the timelines for the really complex mandatory disclosures, yeah, those are being extended.
You know, you can almost hear the collective sigh of relief from boardrooms across the country. This whole move really gets to a question that I'm sure was keeping a lot of leaders up at night. Are we actually ready for this? It seems pretty clear the regulators were hearing that feedback loud and clear.
And just so we're clear, this isn't coming from just one place. This is a tag team decision from the big players. ACRA, the folks who handle all the corporate rules, and SGX RegCo, the stock market's watchdog. They're basically showing they're on the same page when it comes to this stuff.
Okay, so that leads us to the big question, right? Why the delay? What's the real reason for giving everyone this extra time?
Well, it turns out this wasn't some random decision. They're pointing to a few key things. First, the global economy is, well, it's a bit shaky, right? Plus, they got a ton of feedback that, not every company is at the same starting line. Some are way ahead, others are just getting started. And groups like the Singapore Business Federation chimed in too. It's all about finding that sweet spot between making companies spend a bunch on compliance versus actually helping them build up the skills to do this right.
All right, let's get into the weeds a bit, starting with the publicly listed companies, because it's not just a simple delay for everyone. They've actually created this new tiered system, which is pretty interesting.
Before we go further, let's just clear up an acronym you're going to see, ISS-based CRD. Sounds complicated, but all it really means is the new global standard for climate reporting. It's the playbook everyone's supposed to be using, and it covers the whole shebang: governance, strategy, risk management, all of it. So here's how they're breaking it down. You've got the big guys, the top dogs on the Straits Times Index. They're in Tier 1. They're expected to lead the pack. Then you have the next wave of big companies. And finally, the smaller listed businesses, they get the most time to get ready. It's kind of like a staggered start in a race. Okay, now this table really tells the story. Look, Scope 1 and 2 emissions, that's the basic stuff. That deadline for FY 2025 isn't changing for anyone. But check out the other ISSB disclosures. For the second tier, that gets bumped all the way to 2028. And for the smaller guys, 2030. And what about getting a third party to sign off on it? The external assurance. That's been pushed to 2029 for everybody. That is a huge shift.
And hey, it's not just about the companies on the stock exchange. Singapore's biggest private giants are also getting a new timeline. And for them, it's a pretty major extension, giving them a lot more time to get their act together.
So who are we talking about here? Well, a large non-listed company, or NLCO, is a private company pulling in at least $1 billion in revenue a year, with assets over $500 million. So yeah, we are definitely talking about the heavyweights here.
And for these private giants, the new timeline is a game changer. What was supposed to be due in 2027 is now pushed all the way to 2030. That's a full 3-year delay. And getting it externally checked, that's now moved to 2032. I mean, that's a massive runway to build everything they need from scratch.
Okay, so we've seen all these delays and new timelines, but what does it all mean? Let's zoom out. How does hitting the pause button like this fit with Singapore's huge goal of hitting net zero by 2050?
This is a really important point. The regulators aren't just saying, hey, take a few years off. The message is loud and clear: use this extra time wisely. In fact, there's help available right now, like the Sustainability Reporting Grant, to get companies started before the deadlines kick in.
And you can see this thinking in the official statements. The CEO of ACRA basically says, look, we get that companies are facing challenges right now. This is about helping them through it without losing our overall momentum on climate action. The goal here is better, higher quality reporting in the end.
And the head of the SGX RegCo says something very similar. He calls it a proportionate approach. The thinking is simple, really. Let the biggest companies, the ones with the most resources, lead the way. Give everyone else the time they actually need to do this properly.
So, at the end of the day, this whole reset is a huge opportunity. It's a chance for businesses to get this right. But it also leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? Is this extra time going to be used to genuinely prepare and lead on climate action, or is it just kicking the can down the road? The clock has been reset, for sure,
but it is absolutely still ticking.